Okay, so flex in the mirror, display, flex. That's all we're going to set for now. Okay, we'll play with the other settings for flex later once we kind of decide what we want to look like. The next thing I need to do is I need to set up how text is handled. Alright, so if we look at this, we can collapse our HTML and see that the two children that we have inside of this div class content are text and 2/3. Okay, those are the two things that flex is going to apply to. Those are the two sections or two boxes within the second section that we need to arrange and give width and stuff to. Everybody following so far? Okay. Don't feel the need to work along, just take notes. Okay. What?
It's just so fast that my brain can't
ingest it.
take it in fast enough, so I have to follow along, otherwise I'll forget it.
Okay.
It's like
I mean,
taking notes.
well, that's why the video's there too.
Right.
Don't notes like.
Not the first one.
Except for the first part where I explained what we were doing. Yeah. All right. So we need to just give width to these things. All right, because the text in 2/3, their parent content also / flex in the mirror. That flex in the mirror is setting display for that container. Okay, the section, this div container right here, this div. Flex in the mirror sets display on this div, which means that these two other divs, these two children, are going to now show up horizontally. Okay, but they need a width. Otherwise, they're just going to have the width, the default width of their content. All right, so if we look at it now, let me comment that out. If we go look at it now, it's going to be all messed up, right? Our text and our heading go all the way across, even though there is another div in here, and it is showing up. So if we inspect, we can see it. Here we go. If we inspect yourself. So there's my text, and there's my 2/3 that has a width of 0 pixels by 0 pixels. Over there on the right-hand side, you guys all see that? I'm not sure. Oh, there. I can do that. Nope. I can't do that. There we go. Kind of see it over there. So 0 pixels, and then it gets cut off. But it says because there's nothing there. There's no content to give it a width, and I haven't defined a width. So if you don't define widths for things, they default to whatever's inside of them, the widths of whatever's inside of them. Does that make sense? That's the default. If you set a width for it, then it will adhere to that width. Hard for me to say width for some reason. Sorry. Okay, so let's give them a width. Well, the other one's 2/3, and we know we're going to have 3 columns, so that means text needs to be 1/3, right? So that would be 33.33333% of its parent. But the parent, that's not going to give us any margins, so that everything's going to butt up right against each other. And even if you were to use padding, it would then push your other stuff onto a new line. So the best bet is to actually go less than 33.33333%. Go like 32, right? Which will give you 1.3% between each of the elements. So a total of 3.9, almost 4%. 3.9 repeating, right? So we'll go with 32% of its parent because it's percent. Okay, percent of its parent. I don't know what that is. So now we save that, jump back, take a look. Okay, cool. Okay, cool is what I was trying to say, but I tried to say it all at the same time. Okay, cool. That's over here, 1/3. That's what I want, right? So then let's give a width to our 2/3. So class 2/3. In classes, you can use hyphens in the name. In IDs, you cannot. Okay. You can't use numbers in the IDs either, like actual numeric numbers. I think that doesn't work. It doesn't work on older browsers, so it's usually good practice not to use it. Width 66. Let's go actually 64, I guess. 64%. And then let's give it a background color so we can see it. I'm gonna go really boring. and just give it a gray. You can give it whatever you want. Remember, this is where our image is supposed to go. Well, actually, technically, actually, you know what? Let's not give that a background color because it's a child inside of that is supposed to have the image. We'll give the actual image placeholder a background color. So this div ID image, that is supposed to be our image. So let's go div ID image. Now this is, we do need to give a width because of the way that we set up responsive images. So what'd you say, Johnny?
What's up?
What'd you say? Do you have a question?
Oh, no, I was just showing.
Oh, okay. Width 100% of its parent. This image box width for a responsive image, remember this will not always be the same. The image, the actual image inside of it will always be 100% if it's responsive because you want it to be 100% of its parent. For the image box, for the container that is actually changing according to the browser window size, you want that to be whatever you want that to be. That's where your increment goes in. So if you want it to be a third of its parent or half its parent or whatever like that, that's where you would adjust that width. Okay. Alright, so then here is where we're going to do background color. Nice gray. Now the height is going to be a little goofy. We could give it a height to make it look kind of nice. Let's give it a height. This is going to be expressed in terms of viewport width. You wouldn't always need to do this. Well, let's not do it because it's just going to be confusing if we do it. I was going to do it to give us a nice good image size, but if we actually have an image in there, which if you want to, you could run out and grab a placeholder image. That's totally fine. If you want to just dump an image in here. I mean, we might as well, I guess. I don't know. I don't really care. If you want to use an image, you can use an image. You don't have to. I'm not gonna. What happened? Oh, it doesn't have a width, so at all. 0 width. Yep. Okay, so we do need to give it a width or a height. I'm sorry. It has a width. Let's go 15% of the viewport height. Yeah, that's okay. Let's go a little higher. Let's go 25. There we go. All right. So that is that's that image ID. So this would be like a placeholder image, right? There's my text. I've got a little bit of space between the two, but it's not really showing up too well because we have not set how they behave in response to each other on display. So what I mean by that is the justify. I usually use space between. That's kind of my go. It's my default that I always use because when you're trying to set up a grid system, when you're trying to align items by a grid, like be it on a newspaper or a poster or a website, you always want to imply your left and your right hand sides. Okay, and that usually means that you want images or text to run along that edge, to always be pushed against that edge and never be indented from that edge ever. Because if you indent from that edge, you break that implied line that you set up. Yeah.
Space between is kind of flex and flex start, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Space. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Justifying content with space between makes your first element be left justified essentially, like flex start, and it makes your last element be flex end, so right justified, and then touching the right hand side, and then everything else like that you have, all the other containers in there, they're just going to be evenly spaced. Does that make sense? So the margins will always be even. All right, let's see if this gives us. Yeah, see how that moved it over quite a bit. So that gave us that margin that we wanted now, which is like it's a 4% margin, and that's responsive, so it'll stay like that as we move. Okay, it is touching the top, which I don't want. So if you remember our margin versus padding, like when to use them, I'm going to use padding to push. Why am I using padding? Does anybody remember? Padding on the parent. Why would I use padding on the parent and not margin? Actually, in this instance, we could use margin, I think. Well, let's try it. So we'll try margin top. We'll just go like 3 rem, see what it does. Yeah, no. This is why we don't use margin, okay? Because margin is actually pushing the entire section away from the other section, which breaks that background color, which reveals the background color of the body element. Does that make sense? Which is set to white.
Does it push it because the flex in the mirror is like tied to the beginning of the section?
It's but it's not tied because of anything you did. It's tied because it's just by default. It's tied unless you tell it not to be.
So if you edited the align items, it wouldn't do that.
It would still do it because margin is always applied. Margin is always pushing away from stuff, so it never messes with the boundaries of the container it's in. And what we want to do is push stuff that's inside the container down from the edge. So we use padding, and I'm doing it on the parent. So like all of this stuff is grouped together, right? It's grouped together in that ID flex in the mirror. I'm a dork, sorry. So it's all grouped together, and we want to move it as one single unit. So we put the padding on the parent to be able to move them all together. Instead of putting the exact same padding on both of these elements individually, which would work but would be kind of messy because that has the potential to break down in some cases, we just put the padding on the parent and move them as a group. Does that make sense? Why we do that? Okay. Those of you that are not like shaking your heads yes or no, I hope it's gonna make sense. So that does that. Okay. So once again, margin, we have a box, we have a container, right? Margin pushes away from the edges of that container. Whereas padding pushes things on the inside, but instead of making the elements that are inside smaller, it actually makes the perceived boundary of the box bigger, which is why it looks like that. It's just, it's wrong and it's a glitch, but all the browsers use it and all the browsers know it, and so we take advantage of it. You just know that it does it. This is one of those things you have to learn. Right? Yeah. Potato. Okay. So that gives you that perception of space right there. So I want you to do something kind of similar in the rest of the sections. You can move them around. You could have 3 things of text. You could have 3 things of images. If you have 3 separate images, give me margins between the images. Okay? You just need to break it up into 3 columns and then arrange some elements within those 3 columns. All right? The elements should touch the edges of whatever your content class is. Okay, so that width we set up for the content class. So this width here is my content. Okay, everything needs to stay inside of that. The only thing that should be outside of it is if you do a sticky menu like I have here, which you don't have to. All right, that's just, I was playing around trying to get that menu to be sideways because I can't let things go. Yep. Then if you want to, you don't have to stick with the default font stuff. You can do some styling with fonts. Okay. If you want to load web fonts, just go to google.com/fonts. So actually, I'll run you guys through that right now. So if I want to load, these are all web fonts. So these are fonts I can use on the web. Okay. You don't download them to your computer. What you do is you put a link to them in your HTML so the browser loads them into this page. So it will load for all browsers. Okay. So say I want to use this David Libre, right? Click on it. Hey, I like this font. Select this font. Come down here, see this box. I want to embed it. Yeah, don't use @import embeds, please. They're an old way of doing it. Just do the standard link. So you just copy this, highlight it, come over here, copy it, dump it up here in your head after your CSS. Make sure it's after your CSS. Okay? Has to be after your CSS. And then in your CSS, for the body element, or whatever element you want this font to be applied to, copy this font family, David Libre, serif, and dump it up there. I'm going to stick it on the body. So now when I reload my page, instead of it being this default Times New Roman, it is now the David Libre font. Okay? Which is fun. And then you can come in and, I mean, you can do anything else you want to that. Like, let's go, yeah. Welcome, H1, font size. Yeah, so then here's some other things you can do to it. If you want to play with it, where is it going to tell me? Oh, it's not going to tell me. Yeah, that's not helpful. Okay, anyway. When you're dealing with fonts in Mozilla, CSS fonts. Or I'm sorry, in CSS. I was thinking Mozilla, that's why I said it. You have a few settings you can do. There's style, which is usually like italic or normal or oblique. Variance, weights. Weight is what you'll probably use the most. The weight is expressed as a number with 3 digits. And it's always like 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, something like that. The lower the number, the thinner, the lighter the weight of the font. The higher the number, the thicker, the heavier the weight of the font. Size, that's pretty self-explanatory. Line height. Do you guys all know what line height is? It's the same thing as it is in Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, right? How much of a percentage of the font size is the line? Usually it's more than 100%. It's usually 150%. So it's 1.5 usually. Okay. Sure, you're getting a little cold. That's fine. Yeah, no, turn it off. Usually it's like 1.5, but if you want tighter lines, set it lower. Okay. Font family, that's where you set your font family. You either set it generically as like a sans serif or a serif. There's also cursive, or is it cursive? Cursive? Yeah, I think it's cursive. There's slab too, I think. I'm not sure all browsers use that. What else? You can kind of go through here and look at some of them. I think that's more or less all the main things. So, okay, let's go back. So I'm going to set my font size for my H1 to be something like ridiculous, like we'll go 5 rem. And then we'll do font weight to be like 600. Back to the page. Good, nice. Makes it bigger. There will be some default margins that kind of get applied unless you took them off, of course, to your H1s, which I may have taken them off. I did not take them off, but that's not too bad. There's some default line height stuff too. I don't think it's going to show me. No, there's not. But you can always adjust that. If you have multiple lines, like here in this paragraph tag down here under text. So come down here and mess with this one. We'll go text P. So font weight. Oops, weight. Say 200. I guess there's no font. There's no lighter font. I think there's just regular semi-bold and bold. Sometimes it won't do anything. Won't even look like it's changing. But if you want to adjust the line height, so line height, you can go like, if we go lower, 0.5, see how they're condensed? See how the lines of text are now overlapping? So default is 1.5. Ooh, actually I guess default for that was 1. Yeah, default is 1. If you want to give it more room so it's easier to read, you can give it a little bit more space, etc., etc. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah? All right. Okay, so spend some time on your sections. Put some stuff in them for your portfolio grid site. Let's take about an hour to do that, and then before we leave, I'll talk about what the news grid. Okay, the news grid site. Any questions?